My concern right now, and as we're having this conversation, it appears imminent that Israel is going to mount a ground invasion into Gaza. I'm concerned that a ground invasion into Gaza without clearly defined objectives is going to be the start of another no-win war that is not good for Israel and not good for the United States. And so one of the things I've been thinking about just in recent days, you hear a lot of histrionics here, a lot of bloodthirsty neocons, in fact, far less reasonable than even many Israelis that are far more rational about this than some here in the United States, is how could this play out? Right? So if we just think about one reasonable scenario, let's just go step by step in terms of where we are. Israel mounts a ground invasion into Gaza, okay? Doesn't have a clearly defined goal, but they've mounted that ground invasion. That crosses a red line that Hezbollah has previously identified, saying that that's their red line for attacking Israel. And this might be exactly when Israel is mired in a ground conflict in Gaza, which I worry could be a trap. Networks, kilometers upon kilometers of tunnels, a lot of traps that they could walk into. That could be a moment that's perfectly appropriate, unfortunately, for Hezbollah to decide to go after Israel. Israel's then in a two-front war, both in the north and the south in Gaza. Now you're talking about real risk of, there's no way that you're really going to avoid some level of U.S. involvement there. Now look at what the Iranian-backed militias and other places like Iraq, like, you know, the Badr group in Iraq. You talk about the Houthis in Yemen. What have they said? This is also going to be their red line for involvement. So now you have broader regional conflict. At a time when you have civilian casualties in Gaza, that turns the rest of the world's back on Israel. By the way, even in the case of success, ending up with what fills the vacuum, Hamas 2.0, with a bunch of radicalized Palestinians. So I don't think I think that's unfortunately, a reasonable way for how this could play out.
What can I just ask you to pause a sincere question? What is the plan? I mean, this is something the United States has preemptively endorsed and is paying for, so I think it's fair to ask that question. What is the plan?
Well, I think that's the elephant in the room that's missing, is that we don't have from Israel a clear sense of what the objectives are. Now, in the United States, we should be reasonably helping our partner who is struck in the case of really a devastating and inhumane hit to their country. It was barbaric. I think our job is to tell them these are the mistakes we made in the wake of 9/11 when that happened to us here. This is a time to have a clearly defined objective. Instead, we get histrionics from the likes of Lindsey Graham or Nikki Haley or Mike Pence offering histrionics at a time when you actually could use rational strategy.
It's amazing to get a moral lecture from people who've so diminished our country and who are responsible for the deaths of so many Americans, lecturing you from some high horse.
It's interesting. They cite their foreign policy experience, which I don't have, but they wear it as a badge of honor. I think that their foreign policy experience unfortunately shows in terms of the results that they have delivered for this country. My view is, look, a lot of neocons here are far more bloodthirsty than even some more realistic minds in Israel. What's a better alternative to the plan as it currently exists, which is a non-plan, an invasion of Gaza without a clear objective? And I think there's a real cascade of events following Hezbollah, following likely then U.S. involvement, following Iranian militias in Iraq in Yemen.
And U.S. involvement would almost, I mean, especially if it's involvement in Lebanon or against Hezbollah, you could see how that could become a much larger conflict very, very fast.
Absolutely. And even think about Israel's ability to fight Hezbollah. The last time they were in a war with Hezbollah was 2006. It didn't go very well.
I was there.
You were?
Yes, in Beirut, yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. Well, you would know even better than I how well that one front war didn't go. Now imagine if they're mired in conflict to the south in Gaza at the same time. And by the way, some of those groups in Iraq, Iranian-backed militias, they have said that they would strike back, and U.S. involvement here, strike U.S. assets in the area in the case of U.S. involvement. Well, think about where we have our biggest embassy. Biggest embassy is in Baghdad, where, by the way, as of when we're having this conversation, it's a little bit chaotic out of Baghdad. I don't think it's crazy for the U.S. embassy in Baghdad even to be evacuated. So against those circumstances, I am worried that this is going to lead to a war that is not good for Israel with poorly defined objectives and isn't good for the United States. Now, there are other questions we could be asking, which are what might be a more productive path.